fish, and the guts and everything in it. This one's already been degutted, but what I do first is I kind of hold it here and I cut the bottom fin off. So it's just like one little sloop and it's off. I do that just because, you know, when I vacuum seal it, the fin's not poking out and breaking my seal or whatever. And then I'll start up at the head. See?
Now, was this fish frozen?
This was. So this is a red salmon that we got in August.
So you take them like that and freeze them?
No, I don't usually.
Oh, okay.
But I just happen to have a bunch for this because we, you know, I was telling them we had an order that we didn't get enough fish for because they closed us down early, so I just still have a bunch of fish, and instead of sending a little batch, we just decided to keep it. So I've got a bunch of whole fish like this.
Cool.
So anyway, so this one's already been gutted. So I usually start over here at the head, and I just kind of like slice it down right behind the fin here. And I turn her around, and then I stick my knife in maybe about like 1.5 inches, 2 inches, just to kind of go along here until I get to this point, and then I'll stick it all the way through and then go down. Because there's a belly bone in here, so I don't want to cut through the belly bone, which is what a lot of people do, and you can do it that way, but then you gotta try to get the bone off after, and it's a little bit harder for me anyway. I like to do it all at the same time. So I stick my knife in here, and I just kind of go, there's a bone right here, you're just kind of feeling it down. You go down to this point, and you shove your knife all the way through, and as you're doing it, you're kind of putting some pressure down so your knife is on the bone. So you're getting as close to the bone as you can. And then I flip it up so it looks kind of like this. And then as you can see, there's a bone right here. So I'm just gonna watch as I kind of keep my eye open to where the bone is. And then I'll just follow my knife right along the bone. And then when you get to this point, you can just like put your knife here and just rip it off right there. And then just kind of hold pressure. So then you got your fillet right here. So, and I flip them over, and I'll do the same on the other side. So you gotta kind of go around here, and then you stick your knife in just a little bit. And then when you get to this point, you can like go around the dorsal fin here if you want, or you can just cut that off later if you don't want to go up and around. And it helps to have a sharp knife. Couldn't find my knife sharpener this morning, so this is not too bad of a knife. But then again, you just kind of go down the bones. Oops. And one nice thing about having the guts in when I do it is you have something to press against because the guts are in there, whereas this one doesn't have anything to press against, so sometimes it makes it a little harder to get right to the...
You make it look a lot easier than it really is.
Yeah. And so this one, I'm gonna cut the dorsal fin off of this one since I didn't do it before. And so you can like trim it up as best as you can. If you don't want the belly meat, you can cut the belly meat off. I think the belly meat is one of the best parts of the fish. Sometimes people separate them and they do different things, marinate them differently. But I usually just leave it right on the fish. And then I figured if people don't, when they get their own fish, they can cut it off or they can skin it or do whatever they want with it. So let me just make this a little prettier. Yes.
When you put the knife all the way through past the belly bones, is it kind of at the end of the dorsal fin that you stick it through?
Yeah, so it's usually right about here because these bones aren't as, they don't protrude out as much. So usually it's about right here, and then you just kind of put your knife against this bone right here. And then, so from here on, you can pretty much just cut it straight across. So now, what I do with this is I get a spoon, and then I scrape the meat off. And this is what I use for my salmon patties, is this meat. Because there's no bones in this meat, and there's still, quite a bit of meat here.
Wow.
So then I just stick that in there. So you don't get a whole lot, but if you don't happen to get as close to the bone as you would like, this is where you can retrieve all your missed meat. So and then you flip it over.
I've wasted a lot of salmon, I'm saying.
And we get a lot of this because I fillet a lot of fish in the summertime, and most people don't want this part, so we usually just scrape it off and put it in the freezer. So, there wasn't a whole lot of meat off that, but if you do like 5 or 6 fish, by the time, you'll have enough to make some salmon patties.
Heidi?
Yes.
So the soup I brought today is made out of a carcass like that, and I just wash the head really well and cut the backbone in a few pieces and put the tail and the head and the backbone in, and
Oh,
that's how you make fish stock, and it's really, really nutritious.
Yeah.
oh,
it is.
nice.
And really
I know a lot of
delicious.
the natives, they eat the whole head and they eat everything, and
Yeah, and you
you know.
get the head meat out for the soup, and then,
my father-in-law does that too. He always cooks it with coconut milk, and you know, our freezer is usually by the end of the summer when he's here is full of fish heads.
yeah,
So
they're
it's,
really,
you
really,
know, but
the broth is super nutritious.
so before I start on the salmon patties, I'm just gonna kind of show you how I do my jerky, since I have a whole fillet right here. So with my jerky, I usually, you know, have a whole fish. Sometimes it's nicer actually if the fillet is partially frozen, because then you can get it, cut it nicer. This one's pretty much already thawed out. But I usually just, there's like a pin bone right here in the middle, about halfway down. So I'll kind of slice it to the pin bone, and then I'll get my pliers and I'll pick all the bones out. You don't have to do that, but when I make jerky, I don't like to bite into bones. So I usually take a few extra minutes to try to pull those pin bones out. So you can kind of, you know, just cut it right to the skin, and then you can, so it doesn't have, you can have it as thick as you want, but and this is what takes a long time. You can either skin it first or just skin it while you're doing it, so you got like strips of meat here. You can make them as long as you want, and you just kind of, you know, slide it against the skin. So you're just getting the meat and not the skin, and then you can do it on this side too. The belly meat, I think, is like, you know, the best, because it's got all that fatty stuff. So sometimes I'll leave that one a little bit thicker when I do it. But and when you get to the, you know, like the pin bone part, you can choose to pull them out. If you don't want to pull them out, you can try to leave them all in one piece, so then you know one piece of your stuff has got all the bones, and you don't have to pick bones out of all of it. But that's what I do with this. Now for the salmon jerky, I'll cut it in strips like this, and I'll get like a big bowl. And the marinade that I like to use is a cup of honey, which I have it written down here, and a third a cup of Vegisol. You can get the Vegisol at Cadre Feed, or I just actually order some online too. But a third a cup of Vegisol, a cup of honey, and then you put 2 cups of hot water in there, and you kind of stir it around until it dissolves the honey and the Vegisol. And then you put 2 cups of cold water onto the 2 cups of hot water, so that you got like your marinade. And then you'll stick all of your scrapes, you know, your strips in the marinade, and then you'll let it sit overnight. Usually I'll put it in like kind of a cool place. The fish is usually partially frozen when I cut it like this, so it's pretty cold already when you put it in the marinade. And then once it's sat out for however long you want, usually I do it overnight, then I'll lay it out on in my dehydrator, which I used to do it with fans in my table, and we'd have racks and fans everywhere, and it takes a lot longer, and my kids hated it because it would take up the whole table, and it was hard to do anything. So my mom got me this dehydrator this year, and it's been wonderful because it has like 10 racks. I'll spray the racks with like some non-stick stuff, so that, you know, because I've tried it without it, and then it sticks like crazy, and then you're pulling it off, and it takes forever. But if you spray it a little bit, and then you lay the salmon on it that's already been marinated, it'll come off pretty easy. And usually I'll dehydrate it for about 5 hours. Or you can kind of see, you know, if it looks like it's too juicy and you want it to be a little drier, then you can leave it in longer. And then because I like the smoke flavor, which is kind of a process, but after it dehydrates for 5 hours, I'll take it out, and then I'll put it on my smoking racks. I have like a couple chief smokers, and so I'll take them off the dehydrating rack and put them on the smoker rack, and they're already pretty much cooked at that point. But the smoke kind of adds more flavor to it. It finishes the cooking process, and you know, I think it just adds a nice smoky kind of flavor, and I like it like that. You don't have to do it that way. You can just put it in the dehydrator and then just have just plain jerky with whatever marinade you had.
What smoke do you like? What?
I like apple. Apple. It seems like it's just a little sweeter, and that's the one that I kind of like the flavor of. But you can use pretty much any.
What's Vegisol?
It's like this seasoning salt that you get at, it's like all natural. It's got vegetables and salts, and it has a pretty nice flavor, and that's what I usually use for this. But I have, like this year I've experimented with doing more like teriyaki flavors, which my kids really like, and I like that too. And I often use like the Yoshida sauce, and then I'll dilute it a little bit, and then put some more garlic, because I love garlic. And you know, it just adds a little more flavor to it. But Lindsay tried one this year that she found online, and it was more of a spicy hot one, and that one turned out pretty good too. So you can pretty much use any marinade you want. I know a lot of the time when you know, you buy smoked salmon in the stores, they're really salty because they have to have a certain amount of salt content to sell it like that. But I don't like as much salt, so I try to do more of the sweeter, but not too sweet. So it, you know, and it's a kind of a preference. You can try different kinds and see how you like it, and but it's kind of a nice way of. And usually we have a commercial vacuum sealer, so I'll vacuum seal it up in little bags or little snack bags for the kids to take in their lunches and stuff. So it's, and I'll, you know, I can pass this around. I think this is the regular recipe. I'm not sure if it tastes teriyaki. It might be that one too. But this is some of the stuff that I did this year. So we'll put this away. Is there any more questions on the jerky part?
You can also get the Vegisol at Fred Meyer in the natural food area.
Oh, nice. Okay, so
I think it's wise to freeze the fish for 24 hours at least,
Right.
like minimal before you make.
right, and that's what I usually do, just because it's easier to cut it too, and it's so I haven't ever done it with well, this has already been frozen once anyway, so you're probably still pretty safe. But freezing does, you know, kill anything. Freezing or cooking, I think, is, you know, but because it's dried and it doesn't get cooked really hot, that's probably the best thing to do is freeze it first. Okay, so for my salmon patties, let's see, I guess I can just leave this here. All right. So, like I said, I use the scraping from the salmon, this stuff. And then I'll add, I have the recipe over here, the one that I use. You can pretty much put anything you want in it. This is just the combination that I like, just because I like onions, and I put a lot of onions in there. So you put 2 cups of salmon, like crushed up salmon like this.
Do you have these recipes written down or not?
I do, it's
Yeah,
on
they're
that
here.
paper right there.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
see, this is gonna be a little over 2 cups just because I added more to it, but, so it's about 2 cups. I mean, you can double it or whatever you wanna do. So 2 cups of scraped salmon, you know, and this is just, I've made it before with canned salmon, and it's good, but I like it with the fresh salmon because I think it's juicier and it just tastes better. So, you know, if you can get the real fresh stuff, it's even better. But, and then I put in half of an onion, and then I like celery, so I chop up some celery and some green onions. So this is celery, green onions, and regular onions. I stick it in there, see, lots of onions. I like onions. But
Her salmon patties are really good.
so, and then
I've had them before.
I put in half a cup of breadcrumbs. So this is a half a cup of breadcrumbs, an egg, and then a 1/4 cup of mayonnaise. And I think this kind of helps it to stay a little more moist. And I mix it all together. Oh, and I put in like a half a teaspoon of salt and then some pepper. So let's see, and you don't have to, you can kind of put in as much as you want. I don't know if I have my half cup here. That's just a 1/4 cup, so I'll just do that.
Teaspoon.
Or cup. Yeah, don't put a cup in, just, so I'll put in a half a teaspoon of salt. And I mean, you can put in more if you want, or less, or it's just up to you. And then some pepper. Just put some pepper in there. And I mean, if you want more spicy, you can put more pepper, or, you know, however you want to do it. Then you mix it all up. Sometimes it's helpful to have a bigger bowl, but. And I've already mixed some up in that over there, so we can kind of probably just skip this process here. Okay, so once it's all mixed up, like it is over here, and this one, I refrigerated, but I usually don't refrigerate it, but sometimes when you refrigerate it, it helps the flavor, so it's actually even better the next day, that I've been told. But, you know, it just kind of all mixes in a little bit better than that one would be. And then what I do is I get my little scooper, or you can use a spoon or whatever, and then you like just scoop out some. You can, however you want to do it. And then I have panko over here, more breadcrumbs, and I just roll it in the breadcrumbs, and this gives it kind of a more of a crispy outside layer. And you could probably, if you're, you know, gluten-free, you don't have to use breadcrumbs. You could probably use like almond flour or something like that. But then oh yeah, that would be yummy. Turn my heat up a little bit. Okay. So I just kind of flatten them into little patties, and then I fry them. And this right here I cooked in avocado oil, but you can use pretty much any kind of oil you want. Olive oil, coconut oil. Gives it more of a coconutty flavor if you use that. But Okay, and then salmon patties, they don't take very long to cook, so you don't wanna overcook them, cause then they get dry. But just enough so it's cooked all the way through. A little bit. And I did wash my hands a couple times, so we're good. So, and then, let me see, it's not, okay, it's kinda cooking now. Maybe I'll put a few more in here. But is there any questions on how, or do you guys have any things that you guys like to add in your salmon patties?
Dill's really good.
Dill?
Dilly.
Doughy.
I've done like water chestnuts too, because I like the crunch when they don't have much flavor, but it gives like a nice crunch. I think that's kind of why I like the celery too, because the celery gives a little crunch to it. But, yeah, my kids like it, and it's, it makes me feel better that they're eating good protein. But,
I like that Old Bay and Dawes.
Have you ever tried cream cheese instead of like mayonnaise?
no, but I bet that would be really good. My
How would
husband
that
hates
cook?
like creamy stuff,
Oh, yeah.
mayonnaise, cream cheese, and I love it. I mean, I make cream cheese dip and stuff all the time, but I'm usually the only one that eats it if that happens. because-
Ranch would be good in
But, so usually I
With
stick
what?
to,
it. Ranch. It's ranch.
and even mayonnaise.
Ranch
He-
spicy.
He doesn't really know that I put a quarter cup of mayonnaise in here, and he probably wouldn't eat
You
it.
have to hide it, huh?
Yeah, don't tell him.
Yeah, because he loves the salmon patties, he just, yeah.
What do you, how do you serve your salmon patties? Like, do you have like favorite side dishes with it, or what kind of combination?
I think rice goes good with
Rice.
fish,
Mhm.
but, I know my kids, they put ketchup on everything, so they oftentimes put ketchup on their salmon patties, which,
My husband was raised having hash browns, like the cubes, and cream corn. He loves cream corn on the top of a salmon patty. He says
Oh.
that's
Really?
like- So they always eat it that
Huh.
way. My kids do ketchup though.
okay. And
I don't
that's
know, they
pretty
don't
much
need
it.
ketchup.
It doesn't take very long to cook, just like a minute or two on each side, and then it is done. So, we'll make up some more of these later. So, so is what other kind of things do you guys like to make with salmon? Besides salmon patties, salmon jerky, does anybody else make anything kind of cool with salmon?
I found a recipe on Pinterest, and I used the scraping like you did for the patties. And you put an egg yolk in it, and then you beat the egg whites, and then fold the salmon mixture into the egg whites, and it's very light and fluffy. They're fritters, salmon
wow.
fritters, and they're really good.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Wow, that's good.
Right.
Sally?
And I bought a coconut salmon, and that's a recipe I got from Mary Bell.
Coconut salmon?
Coconut salmon, and it's a coconut honey marinade.
Oh.
And is it baked or fried?
It's baked.
Baked.
I made kind of a mess, so I'll have to clean up
I
my
brought a
mess now.
salmon chowder. What else did you guys bring us?
I brought a salmon dip that has a sweet chili sauce and raspberry in it, and so it's kind of hot and sweet with cream cheese, and it's canned salmon, so, or bottled salmon actually,
After, I guess.
and it's really